The wolf was dying. Wren found him at the edge of the river, half submerged in the icy water, his dark fur matted with blood. He was massive, larger than any wolf she had ever seen, and the wounds covering his body spoke of a brutal attack. Claw marks raked across his flanks. Bite wounds punctured his throat. One of his hind legs was bent at an angle that made her stomach turn. She should leave him. She knew that. Unknown wolves in pack territory meant danger, and helping one could get her killed. Alpha Victor had made the rules perfectly clear. No outsiders, no mercy, no exceptions. Anyone who violated those rules faced punishment. And Wren had already endured enough of Victor's punishments to last a lifetime. But as she turned to go, the wolf let out a sound that stopped her cold. A whimper. Weak and broken, and so full of pain that it reached into her chest and squeezed her heart. She looked back. The wolf's eyes had opened, pale gray, almost silver, clouded with agony but fixed on her with desperate intensity. He was conscious. He could see her. And in those eyes, she saw something that made her breath catch. Resignation. He expected her to leave him to die. He expected nothing else. Wren knew that feeling. She had lived with it her entire life. "I'm going to regret this," she muttered, and waded into the freezing water. The wolf didn't fight her as she grabbed his scruff and pulled. He was too far gone for that, his massive body limp and heavy as she dragged him toward the shore. The cold bit into her legs, her arms, her very bones. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Some instinct deeper than reason was driving her now, screaming that she needed to save him, that letting him die would be a mistake she could never undo. By the time she hauled him onto the bank, she was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. The wolf lay still, his breathing shallow, blood still seeping from his wounds. He wouldn't survive the night without help. Real help, not the limited herbs and bandages she kept in her cottage. But taking him to the pack healers would mean admitting she had found him, would mean facing Victor's questions, Victor's fury, Victor's iron fist. Wren made her choice. Her cottage was small and hidden, tucked away in the forest far from the main pack settlement. She had claimed it years ago as an escape from the cruelty of pack life, a place where she could breathe without fear of Victor's wandering eyes or her packmates' casual brutality. No one came here. No one knew it existed. It took her hours to drag the wolf the half-mile through the trees. By the time she got him inside and in front of the fire, her arms were screaming and her back felt like it might break. But the wolf was still breathing. Barely. That would have to be enough. She worked through the night, cleaning his wounds, stitching the deepest gashes, setting his broken leg with splints she had carved herself. Somewhere in the small hours of the morning, the wolf began to shift. Wren stumbled back in shock as dark fur melted into bare skin, as massive paws became hands, as the animal form dissolved into something human. And what a human he was. He was beautiful in the way a winter storm was beautiful, devastating and dangerous and impossible to look away from. Dark hair fell across a face all sharp angles and harsh lines, softened only slightly by the vulnerability of unconsciousness. His body was a warrior's body, scarred and muscled, bearing the evidence of countless battles survived. And on his chest, just above his heart, was a tattoo she recognized with dawning horror. A black crown wrapped in thorns, the mark of the Shadow Pack, the mark of Victor's greatest enemy, the mark of the Alpha King who had waged war on her territory for the past 5 years. Wren's blood turned to ice. She hadn't saved a random wolf. She had saved Caspian Ravencroft, the most wanted man in her pack's territory, the king whose head Victor had promised a fortune to claim. She had just committed treason. Her hands trembled as she stared down at him, her mind racing through options that all ended in disaster. She should kill him now, while he was helpless, drag his body to Victor and claim the reward, save herself before anyone discovered what she had done. But as she stood there, frozen with indecision, his eyes opened. Silver, pale and piercing, and suddenly terribly alert. They fixed on her face, and something happened that Ren had never experienced before. A jolt of heat lightning through her veins, a pull deep in her chest, like a hook had lodged beneath her ribs and was dragging her toward him. Her wolf, quiet and submissive her entire life, suddenly surged to the surface with a ferocity that stole her breath. Mate. The word echoed through her entire being. Mate, mate, mate. No. This couldn't be happening. Not him. Anyone but him. The Alpha King's eyes widened, and she knew he felt it too. Knew he recognized the bond snapping into place between them, undeniable and eternal. Well, he rasped, his voice like gravel and smoke. This complicates things. Ren couldn't have agreed more. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Ren stood frozen by the fire, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The mate bond pulsed between them like a living thing, demanding acknowledgement, demanding surrender. Her wolf was howling with joy, straining toward the man on the floor like he was the answer to every prayer she had never dared to speak. But this was Caspian Ravencroft, the enemy king, the monster who had slaughtered Victor's warriors by the dozens, the wolf whose name was used to frighten children into obedience. You saved me! His voice was stronger now, though still rough with pain. He pushed himself up on one elbow, wincing as the movement pulled at his stitches. You pulled me from the river, healed my wounds. I didn't know who you were. The words came out defensive, almost pleading. I thought you were I didn't know. And now that you do? His silver eyes held hers, unreadable. Are you going to finish what my attackers started? The question hung in the air. Ren thought about Victor's reward, thought about the punishment waiting for her if anyone discovered what she had done. Thought about how easy it would be to end this now, before the mate bond sank its claws any deeper into her soul. But when she looked at him, really looked, past the tattoo and the reputation and the fear, she saw something unexpected. Wariness, yes, pain, certainly, but no cruelty, no malice. Just a wounded man watching her with the same resignation she had seen in his wolf's eyes by the river. He expected her to kill him, just like he had expected her to leave him to die. No, she heard herself say, I'm not going to hurt you. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or relief. He nodded slowly and let himself sink back onto the pallet she had made for him, his jaw tight with the effort of hiding his pain. Then we have a problem, he said, because I can feel the bond. And I assume you can too. It doesn't mean anything. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. Mate bonds can be ignored, rejected. People do it all the time. Do they? His gaze was too knowing. And how does that usually work out for them? Ren had no answer. She had heard the stories. Wolves who rejected their fated mates and lived out their lives hollow and haunted, forever incomplete. But those were just stories. They had to be. I can't be your mate, she said flatly. You're the enemy of my pack. My alpha wants your head on a spike. If anyone found out I saved you, I'd be executed right alongside you. Then why did you save me? The question cut straight to the heart of the matter. Ren opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came out. She didn't know why. She had asked herself the same question 100 times over the past few hours, and she still couldn't explain the compulsion that had driven her into that freezing river. Because you were dying, she finally managed. Because you looked at me like you expected nothing but cruelty, and She stopped, her throat tight. I know what that feels like. Caspian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had softened. Victor. The name came out like a curse. He's the one who hurt you. Your own alpha. It wasn't a question. Ren felt herself flinch, felt the old fear coiling in her stomach. She had never spoken of Victor's cruelty to anyone, had never admitted the truth of what she endured in his pack. But this stranger, this enemy, had seen it written on her face as clearly as if she had screamed it aloud. "That's none of your concern," she said stiffly. "You're my mate." His silver eyes burned into hers. "Everything about you is my concern." "I'm not your anything." She turned away, wrapping her arms around herself. "As soon as you're healed enough to travel, you need to leave. Go back to your own territory. Forget this ever happened." "And you? What happens to you when I'm gone?" The question made her chest ache. What happened to her was the same thing that always happened. She would go back to the pack, back to Victor's cruelty, back to the life she had been surviving one day at a time, praying for an escape that never came. "That's not your problem," she said quietly. She heard him move behind her, a grunt of pain, the rustle of blankets. When he spoke, his voice was closer than she expected. "It could be." She turned to find him sitting up, his silver eyes fierce despite his injuries. "Come with me. When I leave, come with me. My pack would welcome you. You would be safe, protected." "I don't even know you." "You know the bond." He held out his hand, palm up. "You know what it means. And I think you know that whatever Victor has told you about me, about my pack, it isn't the truth." Ren stared at his outstretched hand. Her wolf was screaming at her to take it, to accept what he was offering, to finally escape the nightmare she had been living for so long. But fear was stronger than hope. It always had been. "Get some rest," she said, turning away. "We'll talk more when you're stronger." She didn't look back as she retreated to the far corner of the cottage, but she felt his eyes on her all the same, and the mate bond hummed between them like a promise she was too afraid to believe. The days that followed were unlike anything Ren had ever experienced. Caspian was too weak to leave, his wounds too severe for even an alpha's healing abilities to overcome quickly. So, they existed in a strange limbo, trapped together in the tiny cottage while snow fell thick outside the windows. She tended his injuries each morning and evening, trying to ignore the way her hands trembled when they touched his skin. He watched her with those piercing silver eyes, asking questions she didn't want to answer, seeing truths she didn't want to reveal. On the third day, he finally pushed too far. "Tell me about Victor," he said as she changed the bandages on his chest. His voice was casual, but she could feel the tension beneath it. "Tell me what he's done to you." "There's nothing to tell." "Ren." His hand caught hers, stilling her movements. The touch sent electricity crackling through her veins, and she had to fight the urge to lean into him. "I've seen the scars on your back. I've seen the way you flinch at loud noises. I've watched you check the windows a dozen times a day like you're expecting someone to break through them." She tried to pull away, but his grip was gentle and unyielding. "Let me go." "Not until you talk to me." His thumb traced circles on her wrist, soothing despite the command in his voice. "I'm not asking out of curiosity. I'm asking because my wolf wants to tear apart whoever hurt you, and I need to understand why." Something cracked inside her. Maybe it was the gentleness in his touch. Maybe it was the fury she could feel through the bond, blazing hot on her behalf. Or maybe she was simply tired of carrying the weight alone. "Victor wanted me as his mate," she heard herself say. The words came out flat and distant, like she was describing something that had happened to someone else. "I was 17 when he decided. He'd had 3 mates before me, and they all died under mysterious circumstances. Everyone knew he was responsible, but no one dared to challenge him." Caspian's hand tightened around hers. "You refused him." "I tried to run. He caught me before I made it to the territory border." She closed her eyes, the memories washing over her like dark water. "The scars on my back are from that night. He wanted to make sure I understood what happened to wolves who defied him." A growl rumbled through the cottage, low and dangerous. Ren opened her eyes to find Caspian's features shifting, his wolf pressing close to the surface, his silver eyes blazing with barely contained rage. "I'm going to kill him," he said quietly. "Slowly, painfully. He will beg for death before I grant it." The words should have frightened her. This was the Alpha King, the monster of Victor's stories, threatening murder with perfect calm. But all Ren felt was a warmth spreading through her chest, the unfamiliar sensation of someone being angry on her behalf. "Why do you care?" she asked. "I'm nobody, just a low-ranking wolf from an enemy pack." "You're my mate." He said it like it was the simplest thing in the world. "And even if you weren't, I would still want to destroy the wolf who left those marks on your skin." His free hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch impossibly gentle. "Victor is everything I have fought against my entire reign: cruelty, tyranny, the abuse of power over those who cannot fight back. He is the reason I went to war 5 years ago." Ren blinked. "What? Has he never told you why the Shadow Pack attacked?" A bitter smile crossed Caspian's face. "Victor murdered my sister. She was traveling through neutral territory, seeking a peace treaty. He ambushed her party and slaughtered them all." The words hit her like a physical blow. She thought of the stories Victor had told, of the Shadow Pack's unprovoked aggression, their savage king, their bloodthirsty warriors. She had believed every word. Everyone had. "He said you attacked first," she whispered. "He said you were trying to expand your territory." "He lied, as he has lied about everything." Caspian's eyes held hers with burning intensity. "I am not the monster Victor painted me to be, Ren. I wage war against tyrants. I protect the weak, and I would sooner cut off my own hand than hurt an innocent wolf." She wanted to believe him. The mate bond was singing with the truth of his words, resonating through her like a bell, but years of fear were not so easily overcome. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she admitted. "Then let me show you." He released her cheek, but kept hold of her hand. "Stay with me a while longer. Watch me. Learn who I really am, and when I'm healed enough to leave, decide for yourself whether you want to come with me." It was a reasonable offer, more than reasonable. And yet Ren hesitated, trapped between the instinct to run and the pull of the bond, urging her to stay. "I'll think about it," she finally said. Caspian nodded, something like hope flickering in his silver eyes. "That's all I ask." And as she turned back to his bandages, her hands steadier now, Ren realized that somewhere in the past 3 days, she had stopped thinking of him as the enemy. That terrified her more than anything Victor had ever done. A week passed, and the cottage became something it had never been before. A home. Caspian grew stronger each day, his alpha healing finally kicking in as his wounds closed and his strength returned. But he made no move to leave. Instead, he filled the small space with his presence, helping where he could despite her protests, learning the rhythms of her solitary life. He chopped wood when she wasn't looking. He mended the loose shutter that had rattled in the wind for years. He cooked meals that were surprisingly edible for a king who had probably never seen the inside of a kitchen. And he talked. Not about war or politics or the weight of his crown, but about small things. His childhood in the Shadow Pack, running wild through moonlit forests with his sister. His mother's terrible singing voice, which she had inflicted on the entire pack during every full moon celebration. His favorite book, a battered volume of poetry that he had read so many times the spine had cracked. He made himself human for her, stripped away the legend and the fear, and let her see the man beneath. And Ren found herself doing the same. She told him about her mother, who had died when she was young, leaving her to the mercy of a pack that valued strength above all else. She told him about the years of being overlooked, dismissed, treated as less than nothing because her wolf was quiet and her power was small. She told him about the hidden cottage and how she had built it piece by piece over 3 years, stealing away whenever she could to create a sanctuary Victor could never touch. You built this yourself? Caspian looked around the cottage with new eyes, taking in the carefully fitted stones, the sturdy roof, the clever construction that kept the winter cold at bay. All of it? I had to. She shrugged, uncomfortable with his admiration. No one was going to help me. Ren! He crossed the room to stand before her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Do you have any idea how remarkable you are? She shook her head, not trusting her voice. You survived a tyrant. You built a home with your own hands. You saved the life of an enemy king because you couldn't bear to let him die. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. You are the strongest wolf I have ever met, and you don't even know it. Tears burned in her eyes. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever looked at her like she was something precious instead of something disposable. I'm not strong, she whispered. I just know how to hide. There's strength in survival. His forehead dropped to rest against hers. And there's courage in kindness. You could have left me in that river. You could have turned me over to Victor. Instead, you risked everything to save a stranger. His breath was warm against her lips. That's not hiding, little wolf. That's heroism. Her heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. The mate bond was blazing between them, demanding acknowledgement, demanding surrender. And for the first time since it had snapped into place, Ren stopped fighting it. Caspian, she breathed. I know. His voice was rough with restraint. I know it's too soon. I know you're scared. But I need you to understand something. He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, and what she saw there made her soul tremble. I am not going to hurt you. I am not going to betray you. I am not going to leave you behind when I go. Whatever you decide, whatever you want, I will respect it. But know that my wolf has already chosen, and so have I. What if I'm not ready? Then I'll wait. He smiled, and it transformed his face, softened the harsh lines, lit up those silver eyes with warmth. I've waited 32 years to find my mate. I can wait a little longer for you to trust me. Something broke inside her then. Some wall she had built so long ago she had forgotten it existed, and in its place, something new began to grow. Something fragile and terrifying and more precious than anything she had ever known. Hope. Teach me, she whispered. Teach me how to trust you. His smile widened, and he pressed a kiss to her forehead that made her eyes flutter closed. It would be my honor. That night, for the first time, she let him hold her. They lay together by the fire, his arms wrapped around her, his chest solid and warm against her back. She could feel his heartbeat through the mate bond, steady and strong. She could feel his wolf, curled contentedly beside hers in the space where their souls touched. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was a beginning. And as Ren drifted to sleep in the arms of the man who had been her enemy, she realized that she was falling in love with him. The thought should have terrified her, but for the first time in her life she wasn't afraid. 10 days after she had pulled him from the river, Caspian was nearly healed. Ren watched him from the doorway as he split logs in the clearing behind the cottage, his movements fluid and powerful despite the fading bruises that still marked his skin. The broken leg had mended. The claw wounds had closed to thin silver scars. Even the bite marks on his throat had faded to nothing more than shadows. He would be able to leave soon. The thought sent a spike of panic through her chest that she couldn't quite explain. You're staring. His voice startled her, and she felt heat flood her cheeks. He had turned to face her, the axe resting on his shoulder, a knowing smile playing at the corners of his lips. I was assessing your recovery, she said stiffly. As your healer, it's my responsibility to monitor your progress. Is that what you were doing? He set down the axe and crossed the clearing toward her, snow crunching beneath his boots. because it looked more like you were admiring my form. Your form is adequate. Adequate. He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. The mate bond hummed between them, warm and insistent. I'll have you know, I've been told my form is considerably better than adequate. Despite herself, Wren felt a smile tugging at her lips. By whom? Your mirror? By several very discerning wolves, thank you. But his expression softened, the teasing fading into something more serious. You're worried. I can feel it through the bond. She looked away, unable to hold his gaze. You're almost healed. You'll be leaving soon. Yes. He reached out and caught her chin, gently turning her face back to his. And you'll be coming with me. Caspian dash dash. I'm not asking, Wren. His voice was quiet, but firm. I'm not going to leave you here, in Victor's territory, where he could find you at any moment. I'm not going to walk away and spend the rest of my life wondering if you're safe. I've survived this long without you. Survived. The word came out rough with frustration. I don't want you to survive. I want you to live. I want you to know what it feels like to walk without fear, to sleep without nightmares, to exist as something other than prey. His thumb traced her jawline, featherlight. I want to give you the life you deserve. Tears burned in her eyes. She had spent so many years convincing herself that this kind of love didn't exist, that kindness was just a prelude to cruelty, that hope was a trap for fools. But standing here, looking into Caspian's silver eyes, feeling the truth of his words through the bond that connected their souls, she couldn't hold on to those lies anymore. What if I don't know how to be happy? She whispered. What if I'm too broken for this? Then we'll learn together. He stepped closer, his body heat washing over her despite the winter chill. I'm not asking for perfection, little wolf. I'm asking for a chance. One chance to prove that this... He pressed his hand to her heart, and she felt the mate bond pulse beneath his palm. Is real. That I'm real. That the life I'm offering you is worth the risk. She should be careful. Should weigh the options, consider the consequences, protect herself from potential disappointment. That was what she had always done. That was how she had survived. But she was so tired of surviving. Wren rose on her toes and kissed him. She felt his shock through the bond, a flash of surprise that quickly melted into fierce, burning joy. Then his arms were around her, lifting her against him, and he was kissing her back with a hunger that stole the breath from her lungs. He tasted like winter air and wood smoke and something darker, something wild, something that called to her wolf and made her blood sing. She gasped against his mouth, her fingers tangling in his dark hair, pulling him closer. He growled low in his throat and deepened the kiss, his tongue sweeping against hers in a claiming that left no room for doubt. The mate bond blazed between them, golden and fierce, weaving their souls together with threads of fire. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. His silver eyes were blazing, his wolf so close to the surface that she could see it looking out at her, wild with triumph and possessive love. Come with me, he breathed. Be my queen. Let me give you everything you've been denied your entire life. Yes. The word came out without hesitation, without fear. Yes, Caspian. I'll come with you. His answering smile was brighter than the sun on snow. He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise sealed between their lips. And standing in the clearing behind her hidden cottage, held in the arms of the man fate had chosen for her, Wren finally understood what it meant to be home. They planned to leave at dawn. Caspian's pack lay 3 days' journey to the north, through dense forest and mountain passes that would be treacherous in winter, but passable if they moved quickly. He had sent word through a messenger hawk he had called from the skies, and his warriors would meet them at the border. Once they crossed into Shadowpack territory, Victor could not touch them. But Victor found them first. Wren woke in the darkness to the sound of howling. She sat up, her heart pounding, the mate bond screaming with sudden alarm. Beside her, Caspian was already on his feet, his body tense, his silver eyes scanning the darkness beyond the cottage windows. "How many?" she whispered. "A dozen, maybe more." His voice was calm, but she could feel his wolf raging beneath the surface. "They've surrounded the cottage." Terror flooded through her, cold and suffocating. Victor. He had found her hidden sanctuary. He had discovered her betrayal. And now he was here, with warriors at his back, ready to make her pay for every crime she had committed. "You need to run." She grabbed Caspian's arm, her fingers digging into his skin. "There's a passage behind the woodpile. It leads into the forest. You can slip out before they—" "I'm not leaving you." His hand closed over hers, warm and steady. "Whatever happens, we face it together." "Caspian, if he catches you, he'll kill you. He'll make it slow and terrible, and he'll make me watch. Then he'll have to get through me first." He pressed a fierce kiss to her forehead. "I didn't survive that river just to lose you now, little wolf. Trust me." Before she could argue, a voice cut through the night, oily and familiar and dripping with false charm. "Wren, my darling, I know you're in there." Victor's words slithered through the walls like poison. "Come out and face me. Bring my enemy with you. Let's settle this like civilized wolves." Caspian's lip curled in a snarl. Civilized. He doesn't know the meaning of the word. "He'll burn the cottage," Wren said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He'll burn it with us inside if we don't come out." "Then we go out." Caspian caught her face in his hands, his silver eyes burning into hers. "But we go out together. And no matter what he says, no matter what he threatens, remember this: you are mine. He cannot take you from me. I won't allow it." She nodded, drawing strength from his certainty. Then, hand in hand, they walked out to face the monster who had haunted her nightmares for years. Victor stood in the clearing, flanked by a dozen of his strongest warriors. He was tall and broad, with iron-gray hair and a face that might have been handsome if not for the cruelty etched into every line. His eyes, cold and pale as a frozen lake, fixed on Wren with an expression that made her skin crawl. "There you are." His smile was a knife wrapped in silk. "I've been looking for you, my sweet. You've caused quite a bit of trouble running off like that. And harboring an enemy of the pack?" He clicked his tongue in mock disappointment. "That's treason, little Wren, punishable by death. The only one dying tonight is you." Caspian stepped forward, his wolf pressing so close to the surface that his features had begun to shift. "For what you did to my sister, for what you've done to Wren, for every innocent wolf you've broken under your rule." Victor laughed, a sound that grated against Wren's bones. "The great Caspian Ravencroft, I thought my warriors had killed you by the river. Clearly they failed." His pale eyes slid to Wren. "But you saved him, didn't you? Nursed him back to health. Spread your legs for the enemy like the worthless whore I always knew you were." Rage erupted through the mate bond, Caspian's fury so intense it nearly brought her to her knees. He lunged forward, but Victor's warriors moved to intercept, their teeth bared, their bodies forming a wall between the two alphas. Ah. Victor waggled a finger like he was scolding a child. "Not so fast. You're outnumbered, Ravencroft. Outmatched. You might be an alpha king, but even you can't fight a dozen wolves alone." "He's not alone." The words left Wren's mouth before she could stop them. She stepped forward to stand beside Caspian, her wolf rising inside her with a ferocity she had never felt before. The mate bond blazed between them, lending her strength, lending her courage. Victor's eyes narrowed. "What's this? The little mouse finally found her teeth." "You don't own me." Her voice was steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. "You never did, and I would rather die beside my mate than live another day under your rule." Something ugly flickered across Victor's face, the false charm stripped away, leaving nothing but cold, calculated malice. So be it. He raised his hand, signaling his warriors. Kill the Alpha, but bring the girl to me alive. I want to teach her what happens to wolves who betray their pack. The warriors surged forward, and the clearing erupted into chaos. Caspian shifted mid-stride, his body exploding into the massive black wolf that had first captured Ren's attention by the river. He met the first wave of attackers with a ferocity that stole her breath, his jaws closing around throats, his claws raking through fur and flesh. 3 wolves fell before the others even reached him. But there were too many. Even an Alpha King couldn't fight a dozen warriors alone. Ren tried to help. She shifted into her own wolf, small and gray and nothing compared to the monsters surrounding them, and threw herself into the fray. She bit and clawed and fought with everything she had, her wolf finally unleashed after years of suppression. But she was too weak, too untrained, and a massive paw sent her flying into a snowbank before she could do any real damage. She shifted back to human form, dazed and aching, and looked up just in time to see Victor's warriors drag Caspian down. No! The scream tore from her throat as she watched them pile onto him, their teeth sinking into his already scarred body, their claws raking fresh wounds across his flanks. Caspian fought like a demon, throwing wolves off with powerful snaps of his jaws, but for every one he dislodged, 2 more took its place. Victor watched from the edge of the clearing, his pale eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Hold him, he commanded. I want him to watch what comes next. The warriors forced Caspian onto his belly, pinning him to the blood-soaked snow. He snarled and thrashed, but there were too many of them, and his wounds, the old ones barely healed, the new ones bleeding freely, had finally taken their toll. Through the mate bond, Ren felt his agony, his fury, his desperate fear for her. Victor crossed the clearing in slow, measured steps. He stopped in front of Ren, who had struggled to her feet, her body screaming with pain. Look at you. He reached out and grabbed her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. So defiant, so brave. You actually thought you could escape me. His grip tightened, his nails digging into her skin. You thought this broken Alpha King could save you. How touching. Let him go. Her voice came out as a rasp. Please, he's not part of this. Just let him go and I'll do whatever you want. Ren, no. Caspian's voice was half human, half growl, torn from his throat despite the wolves pinning him down. Don't you dare sacrifice yourself for me. Victor laughed. How romantic. The enemy king begging for his little mate. He released Ren's chin and turned to face Caspian, his expression twisting with cruel amusement. You know what I think I'll do? I think I'll mark her. Right here, right now, while you watch. I'll make her mine in every way that matters, and then I'll kill you slowly, and the last thing you'll see is my teeth in her throat. Horror washed over Ren, cold and absolute. The marking, the forced bond that would chain her to Victor forever, that would sever the connection she shared with Caspian and replace it with something dark and poisonous. No. The word came out as a whisper, then louder, stronger. No, I won't let you. You don't have a choice. Victor's hand shot out and grabbed her by the throat, dragging her against his body. You never had a choice, little Ren. You were always going to be mine. This pathetic detour changes nothing. Through the bond, she felt Caspian's anguish, a raw, bleeding wound of helplessness and rage. He was fighting with everything he had, but the warriors held him fast, and his body was failing, and there was nothing he could do. Nothing he could do. But maybe there was something she could do. Ren stopped struggling. She went limp in Victor's grip, letting her body sag, letting her eyes drop to the ground. Victor laughed, triumphant. That's better. Accept your fate. Accept... She drove her knee into his groin with every ounce of strength she possessed. Victor doubled over with a howl of pain, his grip loosening just enough for her to tear free. She didn't run toward the forest, didn't try to escape. Instead, she ran toward Caspian, toward the wolves pinning him down, toward the mate whose bond she could feel burning like fire in her chest. She didn't know what she was doing, didn't understand the power building inside her, the wolf that had been silent her whole life suddenly roaring to the surface with a force that shook her to her core. All she knew was that she could not let Victor win, could not let Caspian die, could not let this be the end of everything they had built together. Something inside her cracked open, and what poured out was light. The clearing exploded with golden fire. Ren felt it burst from her chest, from the place where the mate bond lived, a wave of pure power that sent Victor's warriors flying. They scattered like leaves in a storm, yelping and howling as the light seared through them. Caspian surged to his feet, finally free, and shifted back to human form. He stared at her with wide, disbelieving eyes. "Ren," he breathed. "What? How?" She didn't know. She couldn't explain it. All she knew was that the power was fading now, draining out of her as quickly as it had come, leaving her hollow and exhausted and swaying on her feet. And Victor was still standing. Impossible. He straightened, his pale eyes fixed on her with new wariness. "You shouldn't be able to do that. You're nothing. You're weak." "She's my mate." Caspian moved to stand in front of her, his naked body bloody and battered, but his stance unyielding. "And that makes her the strongest wolf you've ever faced." Victor's face twisted with rage. "Then you'll die together." He shifted and lunged, but a horn sounded in the distance, and the thunder of approaching paws shook the forest floor. Caspian's pack had arrived. They poured into the clearing like a river of shadow and silver. Wolves of every size and color, their eyes blazing with battle fury, their alpha's call singing through their blood. At their head ran a massive gray wolf with scars crossing his muzzle. Caspian's second in command, Ren would later learn, a warrior named Brennan, who had been searching for his king since the attack by the river. Victor's remaining warriors scattered. Some fled into the forest, abandoning their alpha without a backward glance. Others stood their ground, only to be overwhelmed by the Shadow Pack's superior numbers. Within moments, the battle was over, the snow littered with fallen wolves, the survivors pinned beneath Caspian's warriors. Only Victor remained standing. He had shifted back to human form, his chest heaving, his pale eyes darting between the wolves surrounding him. For the first time since Ren had known him, he looked afraid. "This isn't over, Ravencroft." His voice was steady, but she could see the tremor in his hands. "Kill me, and my pack will retaliate. You'll have a war that never ends." "Your pack is finished." Caspian stalked toward him, power radiating from every line of his body despite his wounds. "Your warriors have already surrendered. Your territory is surrounded. And your people." He smiled, cold and sharp. "Your people have been waiting for someone to free them from your tyranny. They won't mourn you, Victor. They'll celebrate." Victor's eyes found Ren, and something ugly twisted his features. "This is your fault. You worthless little—" Caspian's hand closed around his throat, cutting off the words. He lifted Victor off his feet with terrifying ease, his silver eyes blazing with 5 years of suppressed fury. "My sister's name was Alara," Caspian said quietly. "She was 23 years old. She loved poetry and thunderstorms and terrible puns that made everyone groan. She believed that peace was possible between our packs. She came to you with open hands, and you slaughtered her like an animal." Victor clawed at Caspian's grip, his face purpling. "This is for her." Caspian's voice was ice. "This is for every wolf you've broken. This is for Ren, and the scars you left on her back, and every night she spent afraid." He twisted, and Victor's neck snapped with a sound that echoed through the silent clearing. The alpha fell to the snow, his pale eyes staring at nothing. Dead. Finally. Mercifully dead. Ren felt the breath leave her body. She swayed, her legs buckling, and then Caspian was there, catching her before she could fall. He wrapped his arms around her and held her tight, his heart pounding against hers. "It's over," he murmured into her hair. "He can never hurt you again." She couldn't speak, could only cling to him as the reality washed over her. Victor was dead, the monster who had haunted her nightmares, who had scarred her body and broken her spirit, who had made her believe she was worthless. He was gone. She was free. Brennan approached, having shifted back to human form. He was a grizzled wolf in his 40s, with kind eyes that softened when they landed on Ren. "Your Majesty." He bowed his head to Caspian. "We came as fast as we could. When we found your trail at the river, we feared the worst." "Your timing was impeccable, old friend." Caspian kept one arm wrapped firmly around Ren, as if afraid she might disappear. "We have much to discuss. But first," he looked down at her, his expression gentle. "My mate needs rest." "Mate?" Brennan's eyebrows rose, and a slow smile spread across his weathered face. "Well, that explains the desperation in your hawk message." He bowed to Ren, deep and formal. "Welcome to the Shadow Pack, my lady. We are honored to have you." Ren didn't know what to say. She had spent her entire life being treated as less than nothing, and now an Alpha's second was bowing to her like she was someone important. "The power she displayed," Caspian said quietly to Brennan. "Have you ever seen anything like it?" Brennan studied Ren with new interest. "The golden fire? That's old magic, Your Majesty. Very old. The kind that only manifests in wolves with alpha blood who have been suppressed their entire lives." His eyes met hers with something like wonder. "Your mother, was she anyone of note?" Ren thought of her mother, who had died when she was young, who had been quiet and gentle and afraid of Victor just like everyone else, who had never spoken of where she came from or who her people were. "I don't know," she admitted. "She never talked about her past." "We'll find out," Caspian promised, pressing a kiss to her temple. "But not tonight. Tonight, we go home." Home. The word wrapped around her heart like a warm embrace. She had never had a home, had never belonged anywhere or to anyone. But looking up at Caspian, feeling the mate bond humming steady and strong between them, she knew that was about to change. "Take me home," she whispered. And as the Shadow Pack gathered around them, ready to escort their king and his new queen to safety, Ren let herself believe that maybe, finally, she had found where she belonged. The Shadow Pack's fortress rose from the mountains like a dream. Ren had expected something cold and imposing, dark as the pack's name suggested. Instead, she found warmth. The great stone walls were softened by climbing ivy, even in winter. Fires blazed in every window, casting golden light across the snow. And the wolves who lined the courtyard to greet their returning king didn't look at Ren with suspicion or hostility. They looked at her with open curiosity and welcoming smiles. Caspian helped her down from the horse they had shared for the 3-day journey, his hands lingering on her waist. He had barely let her out of his sight since the battle, touching her constantly as if to reassure himself that she was real. "What do you think?" he asked, watching her take in the fortress. "It's beautiful." The words felt inadequate. "It's nothing like what I expected." "Victor's stories, I assume." A wry smile crossed his face. "He painted us as savages living in darkness. The truth is rather different." An older woman emerged from the crowd, her silver hair braided with ribbons, her eyes the same pale gray as Caspian's. She swept toward them with regal grace and pulled Caspian into a fierce embrace. "You foolish boy," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "When Brennan's message arrived, I thought my heart would stop. Attacked by the river? Missing for weeks? I'm sorry, Mother. Caspian hugged her back tightly. I didn't mean to worry you. His mother. Wren felt suddenly, terribly out of place. She was meeting the Queen Mother in travel-stained clothes, her hair tangled, her body still bearing the bruises of battle. This was not how she should be presented to her mate's family. But then the woman's gray eyes found hers, and they softened with immediate warmth. And you must be Wren. She released Caspian and took Wren's hands in her own. My son's messages spoke of little else. The brave wolf who saved his life. The mate fate chose for him. She smiled, and it was so like Caspian's smile that Wren's heart ached. Welcome, child. Welcome to your new home. Tears burned in Wren's eyes. Thank you, Your Majesty. None of that. The Queen Mother squeezed her hands. You'll call me Seraphina, or Mother, if you prefer. You're family now. Family. The word cracked something open inside Wren's chest. She had been without family for so long, had forgotten what it felt like to belong to something larger than herself. The days that followed were a blur of new faces and new experiences. Wren was given chambers that adjoined Caspian's, filled with soft furs and warm fires, and everything she could possibly need. The pack's healers tended to her injuries and declared her in perfect health, save for the exhaustion of manifesting power she had never been trained to use. Seraphina took her under her wing, teaching her the customs of the Shadow Pack, introducing her to wolves who would become her subjects. And every night, Caspian came to her chambers and held her until she fell asleep, asking nothing more than her presence, giving her time to heal. On the 7th night, he arrived with something different in his eyes. Come with me, he said, holding out his hand. There's something I want to show you. He led her through the fortress and up a winding staircase until they emerged onto a tower balcony overlooking the mountains. The stars blazed overhead, impossibly bright, and the moon hung full and silver in the clear winter sky. This was my father's favorite place, Caspian said quietly. He proposed to my mother here, under this same moon. He turned to face her, and the intensity in his silver eyes made her breath catch. I want to do the same. He sank to one knee. Wren's heart stopped. I know we haven't had a traditional courtship, he said, a small smile playing at his lips. I know you found me half dead in a river and spent weeks nursing me back to health while I invaded your sanctuary and upended your entire life. His expression grew serious. But I have never been more certain of anything than I am of you, Wren. You are my mate, my equal, the other half of my soul. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a ring, a band of silver set with a moonstone that glowed like captured starlight. Will you marry me? Will you be my queen, not because fate demands it, but because you choose it? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that you deserve every happiness you were ever denied? Tears streamed down Wren's face, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. Yes, yes, Caspian, I'll marry you. He slid the ring onto her finger and rose, pulling her into his arms. His kiss was gentle and fierce all at once, a promise and a claiming, a beginning and a forever. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. One more thing, he murmured, if you're willing. Anything. Let me mark you, here, under the moon, where my parents sealed their bond. His eyes searched hers. Let me make you mine in every way that matters. She tilted her head, baring her throat in answer. His lips brushed her skin, warm and reverent. Then his teeth sank in, and the mate bond completed itself in an explosion of golden light. She felt him flood through her, his love, his devotion, his absolute commitment to her happiness. And she poured herself back into him, all her fear and hope and newfound strength. When he pulled back, his eyes were blazing with satisfaction and love. Mine, he growled. Yours, she whispered. Forever. And standing on the tower where his parents had begun their story, Ren and Caspian began their own. The wedding took place on the first day of spring. Ren stood before a mirror in the queen's chambers, barely recognizing the woman who stared back at her. She wore a gown of ivory silk embroidered with silver thread, delicate as moonlight on snow. Her hair had been woven with tiny white flowers, and the mark on her throat, Caspian's mark, was displayed proudly above the neckline. She looked like a queen. More importantly, she finally felt like one. A knock at the door announced Seraphina's arrival. The Queen Mother entered with tears already glistening in her gray eyes. "You look beautiful, my dear." She crossed the room and took Ren's hands in her own. "Absolutely beautiful. My son is the luckiest wolf alive." "I'm the lucky one," Ren said softly. "I still can't believe any of this is real." "It's real." Seraphina squeezed her hands. "And speaking of real things, I have something for you. Something we discovered while researching your heritage." She withdrew a worn leather journal from the folds of her gown and pressed it into Ren's hands. "Your mother's name was Lissara. She was the only daughter of the last Alpha King of the Eastern Territories, a kingdom that fell to Victor's father decades ago. She escaped the massacre as a child and spent her life in hiding, never telling anyone who she really was." Seraphina's eyes were soft with sympathy. "You come from Alpha blood, Ren, royal blood. The power you manifested in that clearing wasn't an accident. It was your birthright, finally set free." Ren stared at the journal, her mother's handwriting covering pages she had never known existed. Lissara. Her mother had been a princess, a survivor, a woman who had hidden her true self to protect the daughter she loved. "She would be so proud of you," Seraphina said gently. "I know it." Tears spilled down Ren's cheeks, but she smiled through them. "Thank you for finding this, for everything." The wedding ceremony was held in the Great Hall, packed with wolves from a dozen allied territories. Ren walked down the aisle alone, her head held high, no longer ashamed of having no family to escort her. She had family now, an entire pack of wolves who had welcomed her as their queen. And waiting at the end of the aisle, his silver eyes shining with love, stood the man who had changed everything. The vows they exchanged were traditional and ancient, words spoken by mated pairs for generations. But when Caspian looked at her and promised to love her for all the days of his life, Ren felt the truth of it resonating through the mate bond, unshakable and eternal. When the officiant declared them wed, Caspian kissed her so thoroughly that the crowd erupted into cheers and laughter. She clung to him, smiling against his lips, her heart so full she thought it might burst. The celebration lasted well into the night. There was feasting and dancing and more joy than Ren had ever experienced. But as the moon rose high over the mountains, she pulled Caspian aside with a secret burning on her tongue. "I have something to tell you," she whispered. He searched her face with concern. "What is it?" She took his hand and pressed it to her stomach, watching understanding dawn in his eyes. "The healer confirmed it this morning," she said. "We're going to have a child." Caspian went perfectly still. Then a smile broke across his face, radiant and wondering and so full of love that it stole her breath. "A child," he breathed. "Our child." He pulled her into his arms and held her close, his face buried in her hair, his shoulders shaking with silent emotion. Through the bond, she felt his overwhelming joy, his fierce protectiveness, his absolute devotion to her and the life growing inside her. "I love you," he said roughly. "You and our baby, my family, my everything." Ren smiled up at the man who had been her enemy, her savior, and her mate. The man she had pulled from a frozen river on a desperate whim, never knowing that she was saving her own future. "I love you too," she whispered. "Thank you for letting me save you." He laughed, the sound rich and warm. Thank you for being stubborn enough to try. Outside, the spring moon rose over the mountains, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled with joy. And in the great hall of the Shadow Pack, surrounded by wolves who had become her family, Wren finally understood what her mother had sacrificed everything to give her: a chance at happiness, a chance at love, a chance to live, and she would never waste a single moment of it. The end.